talk about decentralization and bank annihilation. Bitcoin, Litecoin, Moneycoin, your coin, blockchain, baby. Mondays at 1600 hours Eastern, Studio A.
Deep understanding must arise during these times of unparalleled deceit. A view into the depths of society upon which this country has fallen, a storm brews upon the horizon. It's been said that those that have the eyes to see and the ears to hear will play a paramount role in the furthering of humanity and civilized society. But can civilized society and humanity survive the coming conflicts not seen since a dawn of time in ages bypast? But you can find true forms of information and knowledge in abundance at revolution.radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the globe. Stand upon the right side of history.
General Homer, you've got to get us out of here now! I won't let you down. I won't let you down, son.
Revolution.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
What's happened? Welcome to Sunday Night Live. What's happening to me? Welcome to Sunday Night Live on Revolution Radio. And tonight we have a special guest, Robert Stanley, has surprised us by popping into the show, and that's fantastic. And I'd just like to welcome Taj Gill, my co-host, and let's kick off the show. How are you, Robert?
Doing well, Christine. How are you?
Yes, bearing up over here in sunny England. It's pretty horrid out here. Nobody can afford to heat our rooms, and it's pretty cold, and food prices are really high, and things aren't great right now here. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I do follow what's going on in the UK because my father was living there for many years. He was remarried to a very lovely English woman, and she is surviving him somewhere near Sheffield. So yes, I am keenly aware of what you guys are going through, unfortunately. So in southern Florida, where I am now, we dodged a couple of hurricanes in our location. Not that you can actually do anything about it, but I'm just saying we got lucky that they didn't hit us head on. And other than that, I feel like we're blessed.
Oh, that's good. My co-host Taj Gill, I'd just like to bring him on quickly to introduce him to you.
All right.
He's just come back from Los Angeles, haven't you, Taj?
Yeah, I just returned a few days ago from a long trip. So, yeah, it was great out there, but coming back to the rain and the cold is not great.
Where were you, Taj?
I was staying in Calabasas.
Oh, that's right over the hills from where I grew up in Malibu.
Oh, right, yeah. I went to Malibu a few times.
Did
yeah,
you?
I like Malibu quite a lot, yeah.
Well, it was a lot nicer before so many homeless people moved in.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know what you mean. That seems to be like all over that sort of area.
True. But I mean, when I grew up, I was a bit shocked at how things were changing every year or every decade. and now it is just it's really horrible. Some of the conditions there, because for these people, I feel bad for them. But just when you see homeless people, there's also a lot of people living in their cars, which used to be, well, it still is illegal, but the police can't enforce it because there's so many people in their cars, and even if they give them tickets, they can't afford to pay them, and they're not going to arrest them all because they don't even have room in the jail for them. So
That's true. Yeah.
yeah, that's another place that I keep an eye on it. I hear things from people. So
we were just we noticed tonight over here in the UK that David Icke has been banned from travelling around Europe. Have you heard of David Robert?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Mr. Icke he's an iconic legend in the field of, I guess, exopolitics or alternative media or both. I mean, it's just, there's very few people that are that controversial in this world, right?
But it's strange. I don't know why he's been banned. Do you know anything more about it, Taj?
Yeah, I saw the post, a couple of posts on his Instagram, and I think he made a video. Well, it was posted today.
Yes.
He made a statement today about what happened. He didn't go into any details. All he said was, I think it was on Friday, he was staying in Folkestone in Kent, waiting to go across the channel to Amsterdam. And the night before, Thursday evening, he received an email from, I guess it was the Dutch immigration, stating that he would not be allowed entry into Holland, and that he would also not be allowed entry for the next 2 years in every EU country. So basically all the countries that cover the Schengen visa, he will not be allowed to travel to. I'm guessing because, he's made statements before which I would say people would consider to be anti-Semitic and politically provoking, I guess. So I think that may be the main reason. But I think they just didn't want him in Holland, I guess. He was due to speak at a peace rally this weekend. That's why he was traveling. It was literally to just do a 30-minute speech, which he did remotely anyway, by video. So I don't see how, what difference it made that if he was there physically or if he did it by video. But obviously it's created a lot of talk about freedom of speech and, what rights people have. The government can just, cut you off and stop you from speaking, not just in one country, but the whole of Europe, basically. So that's sort of like the situation at the moment.
I need to add something to that, is that here in America, we do have the Bill of Rights, and obviously not everybody honors that, but that's just for Americans, and the internet is global. So this is why the so-called big tech exercises a globalist view or policies of people that use their platforms. Even if you're in America, it just doesn't apply. At least that's my understanding. And so we need to be mindful of this going forward. I know I am very careful about what I say now. And I think we all have to be for now.
Yeah, I think David's already been sort of banned on pretty much every social media platform and YouTube and everywhere else already. So now he's also been banned from the EU.
Physically, yes. But I've seen that happen years ago in Canada. They said he was anti-Semitic, and when they booked him at a venue, he was scheduled to speak, and there was so much pressure put on the owners of the establishment that they canceled the engagement. So this is not new, but they seem to have escalated this type of pressure on it's not even free speech. It's just, I would say, it's normal to have uncensored speech about, as long as you aren't inciting violence Like you can't walk into a building and start yelling fire if there isn't any. So I guess you can't really lie about something, especially if you're causing a panic in the public. But
they're also, don't you think they're making assumptions about what he was going to
yes,
talk about?
of course.
So they
And there
just
was
used that as an excuse to stop him from coming.
anything to squelch the exchange of information and ideas. That's part of the Communist Manifesto. To be clear, in my opinion, socialism is another term for communism, which is another term for Satanism.
Do you think that there's that's what's going to take over socialism by China, I suppose?
They're actually, they call themselves communists, but they have something called a social credit score.
Oh yeah.
Which is not new, by the way. The Bolsheviks instituted something like that when they took over, and Soviet Union. But we will find a way. We will persevere and carry on despite this type of suppression and oppression, because that's just human nature. That's just who and what we are, and I think that's the way we were originally designed. And actually, the more they keep pushing us into their corral, I guess you guys call it a paddock, but it's unintended consequences are that people will rebel and in fact organize and hopefully peacefully push back until the
thing is, it's done the exact opposite of what they wanted it to do, because it's given him free publicity now, and everybody knows who he is in Holland. Because it's on the news over there now that he's been, banned from the country and banned from the EU. So if they just let him come, do his speak, do his talk,
people wouldn't
come back, nobody would have even have known.
True.
Been to Holland, so it's almost like done the exact opposite of what they wanted to do.
Yes, the same thing happened with Alex Jones over here, and like I said, it's called unintended consequences. And the more the dark side does that to us, who are still loving of God and each other, yes, it actually motivates us to go even further into the light and be more loving, more caring, and more committed to living freely. Freedom isn't free. Obviously, we're in a struggle, and I feel that it is purposeful, that God is permitting all this. It's not punishment. Of course, it's not pleasant either, but neither is going to school. The main reason we go to school is to be tested. We're presented with many problems, a set of problems that we must solve, and then be tested to make sure that we actually understood how we solved them, and that is what makes us actually stronger and smarter.
Do you still interact with Enki, Robert?
Well, good question, Christine. I think we need to update that, and I apologize for what I spoke about in the past was based on information that I had at that time. Obviously, my understanding keeps evolving as I exposed to new information, and also really analyzing it. Not just one thing, but all of it. So no, I never met Enki. I misspoke. I misunderstood. If you recall, I've always said he looked like Jesus. And that he either said, I am your father, or I am the Father. Okay, today is November 6th, 2022. And I really don't think I'm ever going to change my story again, and it's this. I know for sure that he said, I am the Father. And the reason I didn't want to accept that because, I know what that means. I think everybody knows what that means. He's saying I am God. And I was very uncomfortable with that. I'd already been through a traumatic experience, and the fear factor kicked in the sense that if I had started telling people back when I was 25, back in 1985, if I started telling people, hey, I met God up in the mountain, they're going to think I was on drugs, or maybe I'm losing my mind, or, depending on who I was talking to and how I was explaining it, because I really didn't understand it at the time either, not fully. I just knew something extraordinary had happened to me. And it's taken up until now with a lot of effort, by the way. It's not like God is trying to make this difficult, but because of the ongoing so-called war in heaven, he does have adversaries, and anybody who's loyal to him then becomes a target. And this is explained in the books that I sent you called the New Revelations. And I only recently came across that because someone sent it to me. And I find it it's confirmation in a way that I hadn't really expected. However, in 2013, when I asked him, and when I refer to him now, yes, I'm talking about God. But the other thing that I was struggling with up until recently was the traditional narrative that Jesus is God made zero sense to me whatsoever. Logically, how could God be in a human format? That just didn't make any sense to me until I read the New Revelations. So not only do I understand now how Jesus was manifested by God as an extension of God directly, but also why that intervention had to occur here at this time, and that it's not simply for our benefit, it is for all of creation. It is to prevent all of creation from being infected or affected or literally destroyed by the adversaries, and that's what Satan or Satanists mean. Adversaries of God have inverted creation and perverted all of anything anyone that they can get their hands on. So it was permitted to exist up until a point. It is going to be stopped in somewhere in the near future. And as I said, it's not just here on this earth. It's something that I'd been calling for a while I call it the divine reset. In a way, that's a bit of a slap for the Satanists who are talking about a great reset. They seem to think that would be a great idea. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen for them. I mean, unfortunately for them, that's not going to be permitted by God, or I should say, his avatar. Jesus is not alone. Obviously, he is, in my opinion now, God. But he's not acting alone. He has literally armies of angels of light that are loyal to him and that are going to implement this great reset, which will utterly end the reign of the fallen angels. And a permanent record is going to be kept of the events that have transpired in the past. In other words, all the dirty deeds that were done by these fallen angels and those that are loyal to them, there will be a permanent record of it, so that going forward, all those who are interested in learning what not to do, they will be able to reference that archive. So this is a very big learning experience, and some people say it's cruel to allow this to happen, but ultimately it does serve a greater purpose.
Do you think that the elite, we talk about them as them and the elite, yada yada, do you think they're actually, in my personal opinion, I don't think they're paying homage to anything supernatural. I think they're very much of the stance that humanity is the gods,
Okay, I did send you that book by Christian O'Brien.
I know. I'm sorry.
What? It's very. I mean, I think it's a bit too much information. I told you, if you only read the first couple hundred pages, it would be helpful to put things into perspective. However, having said that, and having read that book actually a couple times, it's quite clear that the Anunnaki, which actually translates to the Shining Ones. I know Sitchin said it was from heaven to earth they came. Well, there's some truth in that, but I mean that's really not the direct translation. They are called Shining Ones. They're called Elohim. They're called angels, but it's all directly related to that word Anunnaki. And in that society, it's not based in Orion or on some 10th planet. That is universal. There are those that are still in the light, and they truly are shining because they're connected to God. And those who are fallen into darkness are the adversaries, not only of God, but all those who remain in good favor, or they're still in love with God and are working directly with God. So now, where did we come into the picture? Sitchin says it was to mine gold. That's very inaccurate. But anyway, did these Anunnaki have a hand in upgrading us to be a part of their society? Yes. But also the fallen ones got a hold of us and then manipulated us further. So I would have to say that whatever Sitchin was, and I actually was corresponding with him for a while. We talked on the phone. I met him once. I think I told you he was a student or graduate of the London School of Economics on a scholarship, much like George Soros. He is just an errand boy for the fallen ones, the lower ranking Anunnaki who basically rebelled against not only their superiors, but against God. So a lot of that stuff is deliberate misinformation. I mean, yes, you could call it a civil war or war in heaven, whatever, but we know that the first casualty of war is always truth. And so a lot of that stuff that's been put out there by various so-called experts is inaccurate. And we all have our opinion about this, but I think there's significant evidence that shows that the elite do worship and do work with. That's why they do these rituals. They do satanic rituals to open portals and actually have communion with these lower ranking Anunnaki.
Right. And so where are they as the position, like say Putin, for instance? Do you think opening portals I mean, I know Hitler, he was obviously up to that.
Correct.
But is Putin doing that kind of thing, or anybody in the West?
Man, we're all sitting down now, which is a good thing. And I'm going to apologize in advance for what I'm about to tell you, because I know it's going to upset some people. But you asked, and I'm not speaking, I don't know Putin, and I don't know his heart. I just know about the Orthodox Christian Church in Russia proper. And they're very well aware of what they're dealing with. The previous prime minister, the Russian president named Medvedev, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but he came out recently and said that they were actually combating Satan.
Really?
Well, Putin said he was clearing out the Nazis, but yeah, I'll send you the link to that. It was in the news that Medvedev said that they're fighting Satan. Now, this to me was shocking because a little over a month ago, I was given a vision, and I was just driving down the street, and I suddenly saw, I had insight to the book of Revelation as to how and why all the world's militaries were going to meet and do battle in Israel, specifically the Valley of Megiddo, also known as Armageddon. I always thought that seemed logistically, militarily, it didn't make any sense to me whatsoever, like so many other things. But what I saw, or what was shown to me, was the Russians are fighting a faction of the fallen angels. And I prefer not to name them because they'll probably come after me and try to, harm me and my family. But the Orthodox Church knows who they are, and so this is why they have formed an alliance. we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what's coming and why. But I'll just put it to you this way. They're not going to stop in Ukraine. And it is going to escalate. And those who are in alliance with Russia are going to actually end up going all the way down into Israel and fighting this final battle. And the gods, the Anunnaki, will be fighting alongside them, both those that are fallen and those that are still in the light. I know this is very, look, when I saw this, I had to pull over. I was just like, wait a second, really? And I actually found, like I said, I found some confirmation after. This is usually how it goes with me. I get an insight or a revelation, and then later, over time, I start to get confirmation. So when I briefly mentioned this recently, I've been kind of hiding out a little bit or avoiding doing all media because it is dangerous. This is a war or a civil war, or whatever you want to call it. And I'm on the side of God and the angels of light, and the fallen ones know this, so I'm a bit of a target. And I'm trying to be strategic about it, still get information out without getting seriously, direct confrontation with the fallen ones and their minions. But anyway, I mentioned this recently when I did an interview with Rex Bear on Leak Project, what I'm telling you. And that's when a woman heard me saying this, and she said, and I also the divine reset. And so she sent me the new revelations. And this is exactly what he, Jesus, God, told me in 2013, that everything was going to be revealed between 2013 and the end of 2022. Now, everything is just a word. Obviously, you can't explain it to somebody, even if you sit down and talk to them for an hour. Everything is a very tall order. And I was actually thinking he meant just here on Earth, because that's kind of what I was focused on, what he was showing me, including a lot of people everywhere having heart attacks. I thought it was just the shock of it all. Now I know better. Okay, so the new revelations, it was very shocking to me, because it was confirmation that not only the divine reset is coming, but that it isn't limited to this world, and that this battle is actually everything that's happening on this world is being watched all throughout creation on the worlds that are remaining free and positive. I mean, that's when, like I said, everything, and even in the new revelations, it says, I can't explain everything to you because you wouldn't understand. Eventually you will learn everything, but it's if you jump 3 steps ahead, it's not going to make sense. So I have to be mindful of it, of where your level of understanding is, and also because of this conflict is still raging, it's not over yet. He is being strategic, like security measures. So obviously he's not going to telegraph everything he's doing, and also those who are loyal to him. But it is a very interesting briefing. Once again, it's incredibly voluminous. And in a way, just mind-bending, because the implications are just enormous. Absolutely enormous.
This is the book that you sent me.
It's a series of books. The new revelations are actually the most recent. Now, that individual who he calls himself the transmitter. Somehow it's not channeling. It's just a direct transmission from Jesus.
Oh, right. And where can people get hold of them?
The easiest way would be to write to me at unicuseditor@gmail.com. It's spelled UNICUS editor@gmail.com. That seems to be the easiest way, and I mean, but because I think it's important too for me to give a little bit of background instead of just sending you the link. It might be a little bit. I find that people are responding better. And here's the other thing: I was told by the lady that sent this to me. She's a retired school principal, and she said that very few people, maybe 1,000 or less, had actually seen this information, and I surmise that even fewer actually understood it. Because, not that they couldn't, but they refuse to. I knew this was going to happen even when I sat down to read it. As much as I wanted to just accept it, part of my brain or whatever was very resistant, because it is, all right, if you're a religious person, and I'm not, but if you are devoutly religious and you read this, you might take offense to it because it actually refutes religion as being flawed and permitted to be so, because our levels of understanding have evolved. So a lot of that stuff is old and it's inaccurate because there's so much filtering and ego and manipulation that's going on in these so-called religions, specifically Christianity. How many sects of Christianity are there? Last I checked, it's ridiculous. I think there's hundreds or something like that. So everybody has their own version or interpretation, even if you're the same group, like whatever, Catholic. They all seem to break out into their own little groups of interpretations of what is presented. So it's a very difficult thing, and to actually, I think it takes you have to be humble to actually read something that allegedly is coming directly from Jesus / God. It can be a bit intimidating. So the natural default would be to dismiss it. Right? It's just easier to do that, I think, for some people. So, okay. So my story, Christine, but I think for other people, I'm just going to summarize it this way. When I saved that boy's life, and back in 1985, and then I went up on the mountain and I had an out-of-body experience, and I met this. I found myself floating into the light. I can tell you quite honestly now, I'm sure that was God. The light is God. But in order to have an interface, to personalize it, once again, we have Jesus. And the reason, now I can say the reason why that happened the way it did is because I heard a journalist recently saying that she was having a conversation with God and was very upset and saying, I don't understand why you're permitting all this abuse of children around the world. It's been going on for thousands of years. Why? And she claims the response was, I'm not doing that. This is my adversaries are doing that specifically because they know that the children are far more intimately, spiritually connected to me. And that when they torture the children, I feel it. They're torturing me. Mm. And so when I heard that, I was, well, you say gobsmacked. I think I love that word. Because, I was just stunned. Because suddenly it made sense to me. I've often wondered, I think rightly so, why would God want to have FaceTime with me like that? Okay, yes, I did a good deed, but it seems a bit extreme. And now I know why. Because not only did I intervene and help the boy and his grandparents and the rest of his family, I actually did a favor to God, to alleviate his suffering in that moment. And it was tragic. It was traumatic. It was really traumatic for all of us.
And what do you think of the God of the Old Testament, the God of Moses, who did interact with Moses at the end of the day?
God does not need a tent or a tabernacle in the desert. Mm. That was a God with a small g that is very well detailed in the book The Shining Ones by Christian O'Brien. That was one of the Anunnaki that felt that, and I guess perhaps rightly so, that we are we're part of their society, to put it mildly. And within their society, you have, before we came along, there was 3 tiers. The so-called upper tier, let's just call them royalty. Then you have the middle tier, and then you have the lower, more servant class. And then there was us. We were actually a 4th tier that was created to help the lowest servant class. And they're the ones that rebelled. So I'm not saying that, I mean, Yahweh just means I am. It's not really, once again, it's a title. They do this all the time. Like Lucifer means light bearer, Satan means adversary. It's not really a name per se. It's more of a title.
He attacked the Egyptians, didn't he, with all the plagues and...
Well, he attacked, I mean, look, he treated the Hebrews that were supposedly loyal to him like utter slaves. And he intimidated them and punished them horribly if they didn't fully comply with everything. I mean, he had a wicked temper. It's like there's no way to put a happy face on that, although they tried in the Old Testament. So this is why, since we're on this topic, when Jesus was allegedly asked, what is the most important commandment, meaning of the Mosaic laws handed down by Yahweh or Jehovah? And Jesus didn't even say none of those. He said, love the Lord God with all your heart and soul, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And obviously that wasn't the answer they were looking for, but that has come down to us throughout time. I feel like something was lost in translation, and I know it's a bit presumptive of me to do this, but I feel it's important to do. So here we go. If you don't love yourself, you can't really truly love your neighbor, and therefore you cannot love God. If you just simply do not have the capacity, if your heart chakra, your sacred heart, if it is closed, shut, or malfunctioning, however you want to talk about it, you simply don't have the capacity, you know. And we see this with a lot of people now because we've been so badly abused, and it's difficult. It's not a natural state, but it's the state we find ourselves. Most of us, we find ourselves very much shut down on the heart level, and we're more focused on the mind. Supposedly we can solve all the problems with the mind, and it's not true. Any of the so-called masters, you'll see they're heart-centered, and I'm not just talking about being nice. Again, I'll give you a Christian perspective on this. They say the kingdom of heaven is within, but actually the complete statement should be the doorway to the kingdom of heaven is within the heart chakra or sacred heart. And this is why when Jesus allegedly said, where two or more are gathered in my name, that's where I shall be. You see, because when we're connecting on a heart level, something extraordinary happens, which is we energetically or spiritually are not just connecting to each other, but we're connecting to the rest of creation, and more importantly, to the Creator. So he does respect our free will, and when we do something like that of our free will, it allows him to connect with us more fully. It's actually quite simple, but the results are utterly profound. And I'm not talking about prayer here. I'm talking about a process. And there's nothing magical about it. It's not a ritual. It's more of a revelation. It really is, because when you suddenly, it's not, this is part of what the gnosis means. You know, it's knowing something from experience. To know God from the direct contact or communion, it supersedes religion, and it is. I guess you could loosely say it's a spiritual epiphany or awakening, but it's something we're lacking. And I got to tell you, the reason I'm telling you this is because I feel like we need to. And I don't like to say this, but we need to ditch the digital devices because they're designed to enslave us. And more importantly, like if I was in the room with you guys and we were having this conversation, we would have a much stronger heart connection. Heart and soul would be, and then ultimately spirit would come in. The heaven, what they call the Holy Spirit, would literally descend on us. So, and the more we do that, and I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about this other thing, we're actually opening the doorway to not only communion with God, but we're helping the divine reset to take place.
But it's difficult, isn't it? Because like we're in different lands, aren't we, right now? So it's quite good that we even can speak.
Yes, of course. But there are limitations to this. And actually, so let's just say we coordinate something. Let's say I'm going to have a gathering of a handful of people here. You're going to physically going to have a handful of people gather physically in your location, and we arrange a time when we can actually come together on that particular level. And what connects, rather than being connected through the internet or what I call the web of lies, we would actually be connecting through the web of light. Scientists actually call it that. Sometime after I had my experience in the mountains there, I went back many times and I started having close encounters with UFOs. But at one of those encounters, they showed me that everything was connected through a web of light. This was years before scientists ever published anything about it. They're looking at it on the macro scale, that all of the big, the galaxies and everything are connected through these tributaries, streams of light. We can't see it because our eyes are very limited physically. But I was shown it, and it goes all the way down to the subatomic level. So I'm telling you this because we are connected, but we have to make an effort to dial up or connect in, just like you have a modem to get on the internet. Our heart chakra, you could say, is the modem, the doorway to heaven, to connecting to the cosmic web of light. And believe me, when we connect on that, it's not just with each other here on this world, it's all the worlds that are still connected through that web of light that haven't been compromised. So it can be a bit overwhelming. Some people call this.
What do you the UFOs you were talking about? I mean,
yeah.
What do you think that they are? And these greys and that kind of thing. Are they from another planet?
Or another dimension? Yes. But mostly, this world is controlled to a large extent by the fallen ones. And that's one of the reasons that this is center stage for the Divine Reset, because this is where the beginning of the end will take place for them. And then it will proceed from there, almost like a house of cards or a row of dominoes.
The end for them, but not the
Yes.
end for humanity?
Not at all. Not at all. No, in fact, it's ensuring that we are going to have a future, not just on this world, but throughout all of creation and all the dimensions. This is so much bigger than I could have imagined. Again, when he said everything will be revealed, I mean, I'm not arguing with it. It's just I had no idea that he literally meant everything. So, as I say, I'm humbled by this. It's a blessing, and yet it's a bit of a burden, I feel. I'm not complaining. I just want you to understand that to be in a position to communicate these things in this manner is, you have no idea how many people are writing to me because they're so inspired by what I'm communicating. It's not about me. I want you to understand I'm just a messenger, and I'm doing my best I'm obviously not perfect. That's why I apologize quite often for my mistakes, but I am learning just like the rest of us. But part of the agreement that I have is to, I receive the information, I then share it as accurately as possible.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you. I mean, I certainly value you. Have you got any questions, Taj?
No, not really. I mean, I was listening to your question about these aliens, and that whole thing never really made any sense to me, that aliens would travel like hundreds or thousands of light years across the galaxy to our planet and then start abducting people and cows and kinds of things like that, which never really made any sense to me. So I think most of these beings you talk about, like Greys, Tillians, and so forth, are probably from other dimensions rather than from some planets that we, see when we look up in the sky, kind of thing. But that's always made more sense to me than anything else. I think there are like dimensions that intersect with each other. Like our dimension intersects with other realities, whether it's another Earth, another what you might call what do you call it,
parallel world, or
the astral, or that kind of thing. And we get glimpses of it when we see maybe things like ghosts or apparitions or even UFOs, which are jumping in and out of this dimension.
And people disappearing too, and sometimes coming back through these portals. I've documented that. It's really quite extraordinary. I mean, it's astonishing that could even be part of our fabric of reality. But who are we to say that can't happen?
Oh, I totally believe it's happening, and I believe that our governments know all about it, and have
been
using it and manipulating it to their advantage.
Right.
And it's not in their interests for us to know anything about it. And for anybody to say that we're seeing these things, we're ridiculed for it and made fun of. And, like we were talking about before with David Icke, when he first came out back in the 80s, he was made fun of, a joke, the guy thinks the reptilians rule the world,
Well, I think they distorted a lot of what he said, or whether it was intentional or not. Yeah, they were censoring him through ridicule, and not just him. I think, in fact, I experienced it too when I did all my reporting on UFO activity in Washington D.C. It was maddening trying to deal with the mainstream media, and even some of the alternative media was acting like there's nothing going on whatsoever, and we have no idea why you're wasting your time telling us all this stuff. But anyway, they're not in a position to tell us the truth because of who they're dealing with. For the longest time, they said there was no threat. Even if UFOs or aliens or whatever are here, they don't seem to pose a threat, so let's just pretend like it doesn't exist. Now, at least in the United States, they're saying, oh no, it is a threat. And so which is it? I'll tell you, the fallen ones are not threatening our governments because they're compliant. They're complicit. But the benevolent ones, the angels of light, well, that is a threat. I mean, it's a very convoluted way of putting it, but I'm just saying they know the benevolent one. They don't want them here. They're not invited. They don't want to dialogue with them. They certainly don't want them to land and have a press conference and explain, all the crimes that have been committed and the guilty parties over time. No, that would certainly be a threat to the current power structure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who is thinking about or thinks that some kind of disclosure is going to happen anytime soon, is going to have a very long wait. I think that it's in the interest of these governments and the military to keep all this, undercover and secret, and all these black projects and things that they're working on. No one will ever know anything about them unless something drastically changes in the world.
Right.
And I don't know what that could be. I mean, people talk about this fake alien invasion. We might be invaded by aliens, and suddenly the governments will have to reveal that they've got this technology now because we're going to now use it to save the Earth or some rubbish like that. And when of course it's probably them who are attacking us in the first place.
Right.
So it's like they provide solution to the problem that they've created in the first place.
Exactly. And this is one of the ways that the fallen ones, the way they've been manipulating us all along. It says in the book of Enoch that they were supposed to watch over us and care for us because we were a new creation and basically like children, even though we were adults. But what did they do? They gave us weapons of war. They gave us drugs. The root word of pharmacy is pharmacopoeia, and it traces back to one of the fallen angels named Pharmaros. So, and they also turned our women into whores and gave them jewelry and makeup because they thought that looked more beautiful. And obviously they, proceeded to have children and create a hybrid of the hybrid. And those bloodlines have been favored over the rest of us. So it's a mess. It's an absolute nightmare. It's a Gordian knot. And it's very difficult to untangle it, especially when we're being lied to by the so-called people that are allegedly supposed to lead us, or they're actually misleading us on behalf of the fallen angels. And again, like I said, it's not just this world. A lot of people have questioned, is this the only planet where it's all screwed up like this? Well, how could we possibly know? And again, the new revelations, you're free to dismiss them or accept them as you wish. But from my reading of it, and again, I only recently started, but it makes a lot of sense to me that free will is a factor. And could it get out of hand? Obviously, because we have ego and our levels of capability are much greater than most people understand. It's when I'm talking about manifestation. I'm not talking about magic now. I'm talking about there's actually a process that we can do this through our heart and our mind, but specifically through the heart, where we can take subatomic particles and manipulate them to manifest whatever it is that we want or need. Now, obviously, that can be abused, and it has been abused, and that's how the kingdom or the domain, the matrix that the fallen ones created, it's very limited, but it's also very dangerous and destructive, and it's spreading. It has spread from the outer perimeters of creation. Now and over time, it's starting to encroach and metastasize, and that's why it has to be stopped and ultimately eliminated.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard these stories about aliens are interested in the human race because of our ability to, invent things, create things, to manifest our ability to manifest, whereas other races like the Greys or whatever don't have that sort of ability. And I think that has something to do with our sort of connection with what you might call God or divine source or whatever.
Right.
That is why, I've heard these stories like when someone invents something, in another part of the world, someone else will invent something very similar or identical because they're accessing the same information, the same sort of field.
Yeah, the field. They call it, it's what I said before. Scientists call it a cosmic web of light. I think Bell's theorem says that they call it entanglement, that everything is connected throughout creation. But that's kind of vague. I always felt that. I mean, I agree with it, but I mean, I'm giving you a little more specificity on how that
why
really works.
Why is it that we can access it when other sort of beings can't access it? What is different about us?
Okay, well, that's a good question, Taj. The fallen ones, my understanding is the fallen ones, because they've cut themselves off from source or the field, are reliant on a lower form of manipulation. So they don't know how to create anymore. They only know how to manipulate that which has been created. And I'm not talking about the subatomic level. It's actually quite simple, but you have to. the first time you hear it and start thinking about how that divergence occurred and how different the two camps are, I mean, it's...
So basically, it's like the fallen angels turned their back on God, and so they lost
absolutely did. Yes,
that
so
connection to it.
Right. So this is why you see that they do silly things like generate. They generate or manifest using things that are like, you know, molecules or atoms or whatever that have already been formed, and also energy. They're tapping into energy that is 3 generations removed from the actual source. Sort of like wood is frozen sunlight, but when it combusts, it releases all that stored up energy from the sun.
Mm.
It's a very it's highly inefficient. It's unnecessary. One of the books that I'm sharing with people that contact me is called Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East. Highly controversial because supposedly, you know, nobody can do these kinds of things where they just literally manifest food or spontaneous healing or heat or light, you know what I mean? But actually, you guys probably have watched Star Trek,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that most people don't pay attention to is the replicator on board the craft.
Yeah.
All right. So it's highly overlooked, and I know where they got the idea, but anyway, it's the same principle where they take energy and turn it into matter. It's kind of something that Einstein had told us you could do, but he didn't explain how. I mean, he's got it in reverse. Basically, you could take matter and turn it into energy, but originally it was energy.
Everything's made of energy, so it's just a matter of manipulating the energy into whatever form you wanted to create.
Right. Energy turns into matter, then you can release the energy from the matter. But there's specific subatomic particles that if you know how to manipulate them and have access to that flow of particles, they're not think of neutrinos, you know, there's just a sea of neutrinos passing through everything right now. They say, is it energy or is it matter? Well, it's kind of neither. And so that's what I'm talking about, that field.
So we're being cut off now, Robert. I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming on and guesting.
You're welcome.
I'm sure everyone really enjoyed you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you again, I hope.
I hope so.
Thanks, Guy.
Thank you, Taj.
That's goodbye from me and Taj, and see you next Sunday, everyone. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
You're going back in? There's still men out there. God damn. When I go home, people ask me, hey, Hoot, why do you do it, man? Why? You some kind of war junkie? I won't say a goddamn word. Why? They won't understand. They won't understand why we do it. They won't understand it's about the men next to you. And that's it. That's all it is.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, #1 listener-supported radio, the printing press for freedom at a time when freedom is needed the most.
I am Bill Johnson. Some consider my efforts to be an underground law school. I am not an attorney, and I do not give legal advice. I teach. That's lawful and legal. Consider yourself served. You are to appear Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, Studio A. My forte? foreclosure, and contract law. Grab your legal pad and pen. Learn a broad spectrum of law spanning administrative, criminal, family, tort,